Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Mordecai, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation. This is going to be a presentation on a study done. It is a categorized analysis of clinical trial perspectives amongst racialized and marginalized communities in Canada. This was conducted in 2023, and the presentation today is January 10th, 2024. So a bit of background. Clinical trials are essential for advancing cancer research and validating new standards of care. However, racialized and marginalized communities remain underrepresented in these trials, raising concerns for the generalizability of findings to diverse populations. This study aims to illuminate the multifaceted perspectives, motivations, and barriers related to clinical trial knowledge and participation among racialized and marginalized communities in Canada. Understanding different viewpoints within these groups can inform customized strategies to increase their engagement, knowledge, and representation in these trials. So our ultimate goal is to foster an environment where diverse communities feel empowered to make informed decisions about clinical participation. So since this is a categorization, I need to begin with an analogy to get you oriented to some of the glossary terms we will be using. In particular, informed, what does it mean to be informed? What does it mean to be uninformed? And what is a mixed understanding? It is not the traditional definition of someone informed knows what to do. It is centered around a few statements that will be based on whether it is true or false. So this analogy will give you an idea. So let's take a step back and imagine a study that explored the reasons behind lower voter turnout amongst new Canadian immigrants. The research gauged the understanding of certain constitutional rights, including freedom of religion, thought, and peaceful assembly. The participants were then categorized as informed, uninformed, and having a mixed understanding. Within these three groups, a multifaceted perceptions, motivations, and barriers emerged, shedding light on factors influencing their knowledge and participation in voting in elections. So someone informed is someone aware of their constitutional rights. Someone uninformed is someone unaware of their participation and their constitutional rights, and a mixed understanding is someone who kind of knew. So this categorization then allows us to then go into a study to see how did these three groups manage their way in answering questions. So the practicum objectives, the primary objectives of this survey report was to understand and address underrepresentation of racialized and marginalized communities in Canada with respect to cancer trials, clinical trials. Specifically, to identify what motivated them, what were the barriers, what factors influenced their participation rates, provide actionable recommendations to tailor them for the stakeholders that you will see emerge, and empower the diverse communities in clinical trials. Ultimately, we want these populations to be well informed, to make autonomous and evidence-based decisions for clinical trial participation. The methods used were collecting data through survey process. We reached out to many organizations, just to name two, the Canadian Arab Institute and Black Lives Matters as well. These were targeted for the racialized and marginalized communities. The survey was conducted in 2023 between June 30th and July 26th. And as I've mentioned, it was to gauge their knowledge on clinical trials. Participants that identified as Caucasian were excluded, since this is for diverse communities. And individuals that would then be tested were 177 individuals. So as I mentioned, the key categorization component was to divide people into informed, uninformed, and mixed understanding. And for this study, unlike what I mentioned earlier with the elections that was based on the knowledge of constitutional rights, this was based on ethical principles that were put together by the Bellman Report, which was adopted by Health Canada as guidance for establishing clinical trials. So what this is trying to accomplish is to ask the question, what needs to be understood for clinical trials to be conducted? And do individuals know what those principles actually are? And based on whether someone is informed, is someone who's aware of those clinical, those ethical principles. Someone who's uninformed is someone who does not know their rights and what they need to know. And then someone mixed was someone who answered the three questions on these ethical principles in a mixed bag. So this report outlined principles for the respect of person. It's important to know that clinical trials need to respect the person, beneficence, and justice as well. Categorizing these participants according to their understanding of these ethical principles allowed a structured analysis for multifaceted perspectives within each of these groups. So these three groups are going to take us on a journey to be able to see how did they answer some of these survey questions. And now we're going to demonstrate the categories of these surveys. So there were four categories. The first one is the awareness and personal context. So this is about what is the first time this individual gets to be acquainted with clinical trials. Do they have a personal history, especially in relation to cancer? And what was their awareness at the very beginning? The second is the decision making. What factors affect their decision making? Trustworthy sources? Are there any barriers? Are there any facilitators for participation? The third is action and outcome. With what they know, what decisions were they making to either participate in clinical trials or willing to participate, or did they take a step back? Then the fourth is just a general overview on how do these three categories, once again, informed, uninformed, and mixed, how do they permeate with respect to age, their religion, and ethnicity? So that's just a general overview. After collecting data, it was meticulously cleaned, and we wanted to have a high integrity for the results. So let's take a look at the results. For category one, the foundational awareness and personal context. For the informed group, about 43% were very familiar with clinical trials. 46% had prior knowledge of clinical trials before a cancer experience. And 34% heard about this from their doctor, heard about clinical trials from their doctor. So these are just in terms of the influences that were at the top of each of these characters. So 34%, me saying 34% first heard it from their doctor means that doctors were the highest in the leaderboard with respect to the informed group. The uninformed group, only 18% were familiar. 76% lacked prior knowledge. So this is very interesting. And then 33% heard about clinical trials from advocacy groups. For the mixed, 25% were very familiar. 57% had heard of a prior experience, and 24% had heard about this from advocacy groups. So you can almost go to the end of this study to see how our recommendations start to move around what doctors and advocacy groups can actually know about this information. Okay, so we'll come back to this. So category 2 is a decision making. For the informed group, family actually had the highest trust. The time commitment for clinical trials, like how long it takes to be part of a clinical trial, was a top concern. And they valued autonomy and logistical support, and a willingness to, at 50%, to participate. Uninformed relied their trust on word of mouth, highlighted enrollment complexities and diversity concerns, leaned towards external validation. About 18% were willing to participate. For the mixed group, doctors surprisingly ranked low in trust. Time commitment was at the top, just like the informed, and sought balance for advice and support, with a willingness to participate at 27%. For the action and outcome, the informed group at 44% had early introduction to trials. The uninformed had 13% for early introduction to trials in terms of their willingness, and the mixed was much lower at 11%. So a generalized overview for the socio-demographic insights. Young people and older people were the most informed than the middle group. With respect to highest informed for provinces, BC came in at, British Columbia came in at the highest, and the Yukon at the highest with the with the uninformed rate. With respect to ethnicity, Latin American groups had the highest uninformed rate. And finally, with respect to religious beliefs, 33% of the informed groups had religion as a very, very important factor. Cultural beliefs were more prominent amongst uninformed groups as well. Conclusion. This research provides valuable insight in the different perspectives on clinical trials. And it underscores the importance of not just making rigid assumptions based on solely understanding fundamental knowledge in trials. It is evidence that one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. And this is why the categorization approach was so insightful here. Instead of a path forward requiring developing a customized approach, we're able to tailor for unique barriers, motivations, and experiences in each group. By comprehensively understanding distinct viewpoints, we can foster an environment where diverse communities feel empowered to make informed decisions. Different groups are not a monolith, so we need to find the possibilities of different viewpoints within those communities. So this is why this approach was very, very interesting. Although limitations exist, the study represents an important step in illuminating attitudes and eliminating participation gaps, with the ultimate goal of achieving equity and representation. So let's dive into recommendations. For medical professionals, we want to recommend that they provide customized education-based information for the different familiarity levels, introduce trials early and optimize timing, use simple material and workshops to explain the trials, highlight patient testimonies to build engagement and trust. For groups like Health Canada, it would be interesting to target kind of like that group that was in the middle, which is the 24 to 50 to 64 age group that fell behind from the younger and the older, and then reach out to see what's happening in Yukon in terms of why are they so many, why does Yukon have a high percentage of uninformed groups there, and how come British Columbia actually had so much informed individuals. Also look into what factors Latin Americans experience, not to suggest anything, but things like language barriers and other things can be something that can emerge. For advocacy groups, as we saw, they seem to be the first point of contact in the uninformed and mixed. So, we want to encourage them to continue to inform their communities with the understanding that a lot of trust has been put on them, and also they actually play a very big role in informing their communities. For nonprofits, we want to encourage coordinating with doctors and advocacy groups and helping with logistical support to help our participants who may have that as a barrier. For the pharmaceutical industry, they're the ones who tend to be at the forefront of clinical trials. If they could be aware of the time commitment and the complexities that may arise. And as we saw in the informed group, how autonomy is important, if they really can push and promote that as well. So here are the references that were used in the study. And I would like to thank the Colorectal Cancer Canada that was at the center and provided the resources for this to be done, and the University of Saskatchewan that this master's program of public health is provided through. So just a quick recap, these are just glossary slides in terms of the definitions of what I discussed. And here's another view on the other page on the glossary slides. I think that should be it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me and I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you. Bye-bye.